Penn State recruiting would take another serious hit in 2025 if they were to miss out on four-star wide receiver Taz Williams, because there aren't really many realistic options for pass catchers remaining in this class.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Four-star wide receiver Taz Williams is set to make his decision. Penn State is in the mix along with three other schools. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Help me welcome back Dylan Callaghan-Croley, editor over at Penn State Rivals, HappyValleyInsider.com. You can check out all of his socials, all of his platforms down in the description. You lose Lex Cyrus from Penn State's point of view. He commits to South Carolina, and now Taz Williams is at the forefront committing on July 13th, 5 p.m. Eastern time, and it's down to Penn State and three other schools, SMU, Michigan, Texas A&M, and then Baylor was starting to get into the mix, but at least from his post, it doesn't sound like Baylor's in the fold. So, Dylan, what do we know about Taz's commitment here? Could Baylor make a surprise, or is this legitimately the top four?
No, I think Baylor could make a surprise in this recruitment. Earlier this week, there's the reports that he was going to be visiting Baylor at the end of the month. That is, as of right now, expected to happen. Baylor kind of increased that push as the week went along. I'm assuming, no inside info on this, but I'm assuming Baylor believes if he commits elsewhere, the chance of that visit happening at the end of the month is probably quite a bit, less. So Baylor has been making a hard push. They did pick up his one strong friend, Jalen Morgan, I believe it was, earlier this week. And those two have discussed being a package deal in the past. But we're recording this with about 24 hours away from his commitment. I'm not sure when on Saturday he's committed off the top of my head, but with about 24 hours to go, the latest intel we have over at Happy Valley Insider is pretty positive for Penn State. But yeah, in the world of NIL, in today's recruiting, nothing is done until, really, pen meets paper in a couple months. But we saw just, last month with Brandon Finney, Penn State was, leading that recruitment until really the 11th hour before Oregon came along. So not saying that this one is locked down for Penn State, but yeah, this is a legitimate, I would say right now, 3-team race, Penn State, Baylor, and SMU, but still feel good about where Penn State sits.
And that's interesting because Texas A&M and Michigan are in his announced top four. Sure. In the back of my mind, I can't help but think that Taz Williams is going to pull a switch on us and say that hey, I have all my hats on the table, and then all of a sudden underneath the table, there's the Baylor hat, and he pulls that out. Maybe it happens. But if you're saying that Penn State is at the lead, that there's good intel that this can happen, I mean, this is a must get, especially when you don't land Lex Cyrus. And you really don't have that many options after that. It felt like it was Lex, Taz, and that was it.
No, yeah. I mean, Lex Cyrus loss on Thursday is a tough one for Marcus Higgins and Penn State. And I would say it's a tough loss in itself in a vacuum. But then you compound that with the loss of Matthew Alden earlier this cycle as well. That's two of your top wide receiver targets heading elsewhere. They were, of course, in on Quincy Porter Jr. as well. He goes to Ohio State. They didn't have as much of a chance in that one, in my opinion, as they did with Alden and Cyrus, obviously. But those three losses obviously hurt Penn State. And then, if they would miss on Taz Williams, you're getting in a really tough spot. You have two high upside guys committed currently in Lyric Samuel and Jeff Exiner. You're still in it for, right now, one other guy. I mean, they have currently 4 wide receivers who visited last month who are currently uncommitted. Realistically, they're in it for 2 of those guys at this point, probably. So if you miss on Taz Williams, it gets really tough for Marcus Higgins and Penn State to rebound after that. This is one that becomes really important for Penn State really fast on the recruiting trail.
I agree, and I think Lyric Samuel, Jeff Exner, and Taz Williams are all game changers. But if you only get two potential game changers out of the ones that you had wanted all along that were at the top of your big board, again, Lex Cyrus was up there. Taz Williams is obviously up there, and we won't know his commitment until Saturday, July 13th, later on in the afternoon. But I just don't see, I see options, right? We've mentioned Kobe Howard a lot. Very talented wide receiver out of the state of Florida. There's just this weird, why hasn't he committed, especially with Lex Cyrus going to South Carolina? Because I always figured that, okay, you have these three available. It sounds like they want to take four. Five was a stretch, even though I think they should take five, but that's just me. Sure. The more the merrier in the case of based on what happened in 2022 and 2023.
Yep.
But if Lex Cyrus goes off to South Carolina, then it almost seems like Kobe Howard and if you get Taz Williams, like those that makes complete and total sense. So what gives with Kobe Howard's recruitment and why he isn't committed unless Ole Miss and Florida are really making that strong of a push? Who are some of the remaining options at wide receiver in this class of 2025 for Penn State? We'll tell you more about that coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. I love sports, and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have come to a close, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't exactly sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, and all I have to do is open up the app, dream up some bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone each and every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. That is FanDuel.com. And over at FanDuel.com, you can bet on Major League Baseball. Lines are always up and active. Currently, the Phillies are heavy favorites against the Athletics with a total set at 8.5. That's minus 290 on the money line for Philadelphia. And the Pirates are on the road against the White Sox. They are underdogs at plus 144 on the money line with a total set at 7.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them all over at FanDuel.com and so much more, including Wimbledon tennis, WNBA, and others. That is FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Kobe Howard is a little bit down. I would say Penn State's board a little bit out of the guys that they had on the board, coming out of official visit season. He was a little bit behind a couple of those other guys. They have, I think, some questions they want answered. I actually just spoke to Kobe Howard this morning and he says he's going to be back up at Penn State at the end of the month. Let me just get the quote right here. And it's actually something I've yet to report even on our site. So a little bit of a scoop here, but he said, yes, I'll be back up at the end of the month for their Lash Bass. Going to catch up on some bond building with the staff. Coaches are doing a really good job making me feel like a priority for this year's class. I'm getting ready to make decisions soon. I'm still learning as much as possible about Penn State as I can before I make this big decision. So, I mean, he's going to be back up at the end of the month, and I think that visit at the end of the month, how that one goes with the bonding with the staff, and if the staff likes what they see out of Kobe Howard, that one could be something to watch going forward. But right now, I wouldn't say that's a certainty that Kobe Howard ends up in the blue and white after that visit either. This is one of those things where I think Penn State, has to stay focused with obviously Taz Williams getting this one across the finish line, because they've obviously had a few recruitments here this year where it looks like they're right on the doorstep and don't get across the finish line. So I think they have to focus on Saturday first with Taz Williams, and then see how everything goes with Kobe Howard at the end of the month. But I don't think that one is far from a lock for him to end up in blue and white just yet either.
If they happen to do miss on Taz Williams, again, Baylor making a quiet push, SMU, Michigan, Texas A&M in his top four with Penn State. I mean, these are all quality schools. Like they are at the forefront, especially SMU and Texas A&M of NIL. So they're always going to be present in recruitments when they're really not. And like I said, Baylor just kind of making that silent push. So we have to play devil's advocate here, Dylan, and say if Penn State doesn't get Taz Williams, the intel points to good news. But if they don't, if they don't? Let's see if something changes in 24 hours. What are Penn State's options now that you say, well, Kobe Howard's still a 50-50 if he's going to end up at Penn State? There's just not a lot of other realistic options that I believe on the wide receiver big board. I know Nashawn Montgomery is somebody that they're very high on, but all the signs point to Florida. So out is Montgomery. Who else? Who else, Dylan?
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at last month, who visited the guys who are currently uncommitted off the top of my head, Nashawn Montgomery, like you said, had likely headed to Florida. That's where I would project him right now. Taz Williams, we are obviously discussing. Let's say as of right now, we do feel good. But for the sake of this argument, where you ask, where would they go? Let's say he goes elsewhere. Phillip Bell visited, but Penn State seems to be distant in that recruitment. And then, Kobe Howard, I think, is the only other guy uncommitted. Now, I will say with Howard, I think Howard's high on Penn State. I think it's one of those things, if Penn State were to miss on Taz Williams, and even if they don't miss on Taz Williams, I think they are going to potentially push harder for Howard here down the stretch. I know Howard really likes Penn State. He really liked everything that he saw on that official visit with Penn State. I wonder if more of the questions left in that recruitment are on Penn State's side than Howard's side necessarily. Probably will get a lot of those answers at the end of the month when he comes up for the Lash Bash, which is obviously going to be something to watch no matter what happens this weekend with Taz Williams. But let's say if Kobe Howard doesn't work out for some reason, right now it's hard to say where Penn State would turn, just because most of the guys they have offered are committed elsewhere. They would have gone through all their official visitors from this past June. So I think it would almost be back to the drawing board for Marcus Higgins and Penn State at the wide receiver position, kind of evaluate what's still out there, how you feel about those prospects. You almost kind of go back to square one and have to do this all over again and figure out where you're going to go from there. It would be a very tough situation if Penn State did miss on Taz Williams. But as I've said before, and as you've reiterated here on the pod a few times already, still feel good, 24 hours out about where Penn State stands in this one. But like I also said, in the world of NIL, it's not over until pen meets paper in December. But Penn State is going up against two programs in SMU and Baylor that certainly have some NIL money that they could throw around if they wanted to. Though Penn State's NIL, I think, has been quite competitive this summer, all things considered. So we'll see what happens there. But like I said, we still feel good. So hopefully, for Penn State's sake, this is all hypothetical conversation.
I mean, the assumed goal was 4. In a perfect world, you land 5 wide receivers. But if you end up with 2 in this class, that is very short of expectations, obviously. So something definitely went off the rails here if they are not able to get Taz Williams, Kobe Howard, and then maybe somebody else that emerges in the fall if they're not able to recover from that. So that's how important this recruitment is. Taz Williams announces on Saturday, July 13th, via Rivals, actually, at 5 p.m. Eastern time. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. That is Dylan Callaghan-Croley, editor over at Penn State Rivals, HappyValleyInsider.com. Again, all his socials and platforms will be linked in the description. Dylan, thanks so much for the time, the intel, and the analysis. Always great to have a conversation with you about Penn State recruiting.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back, Zach.
And as always, thanks so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Be a part of the discussion down in the comments section. Where do you think Taz Williams will end up? What other wide receiver prospects would you want to see commit to Penn State in the class of 2025? And if you did enjoy this conversation, leave a like, share it with friends and family. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.